Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the fascinating and often surprising story of British and American English. You know, you say pavement, I say sidewalk. You say lift, I say elevator. But have you ever really stopped to wonder why?
I mean, sure, these two words get you to the exact same place, but their origins, they're miles apart. And that journey, well, it reveals a much, much bigger story than just a few different words.
So that brings up the big question. Which one is older? You probably think you know the answer, right? But the real story is so much more surprising. It's a story of revolution, rebellion, and what is essentially a linguistic time capsule.
Okay, so let's start with what most people think. You know, the common assumption that British English is the original, the proper version, and that American English is just some kind of simplified or maybe even incorrect copy.
But what if I told you that this whole idea is, well, basically a myth? And it's a myth that's built on some really surprising historical twists and turns. So yeah, let's take a closer look. We're going to start our investigation with how the two dialects actually sound, and what we find here might just completely change the way you think about the English language.
To really get this, we have to understand a key concept: rhoticity. It sounds complicated, but it's not. It's basically one of the biggest giveaways of where an English speaker is from, and it holds the first major clue in our story. Okay, so think about the word car. In most of American English, you hear that hard R sound really clearly. But in a lot of British English, it gets dropped, sounding more like ka. And it's the same deal for a word like bird. See, the American pronunciation holds on to that R sound, while the common British version softens it right up. This little difference is a huge part of what makes the two accents so distinct.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. This quote from way back in the 17th century gives us this amazing peek into the past. It shows that when English settlers first showed up in America, pretty much everyone in England was pronouncing their R's. That R-dropping accent we know today, that was actually a later fashion that caught on with London's upper classes and then spread out from there.
So, what does that mean?
In a way, that American accent is actually closer to how Shakespeare might have sounded than the modern British one is. The accent didn't really change, it just stayed the same while the accent back in England evolved. Pretty wild, right?
But of course, the differences don't stop with how things sound. Let's jump over to vocabulary, because we're going to find even more historical surprises hiding in plain sight.
All right, we all know the classics. In the UK, you might see a big lorry driving down the motorway.
While in the US, that's a truck on the freeway. And on a chilly day, you might put on a cozy jumper, not a sweater. And oh my gosh, let's not even get started on the delicious confusion between crisps and chips. But the real story is in the words you think you know.
Here's a great twist. A lot of the words Americans get teased for, like soccer, actually came from Britain. Yep. It was common slang over there for decades before it fell out of fashion, right around the time it was getting super popular in the States.
And you know what? It's a two-way street. So many words that are totally common in Britain now, words like hello, teenager, and the one we all understand, okay, were actually invented in America.
So, these differences in spelling and grammar, they're not random either. They're actually the result of two separate and very intentional journeys.
These spelling differences didn't just happen by accident. Nope. Back in the late 1700s, American reformers, especially a guy named Noah Webster, who was super passionate about creating a distinct American identity, he set out to make English more logical, more phonetic. His dictionaries are the reason Americans write color without a U.
Grammar evolved differently too. A really famous example is the verb get. The word gotten was the original past participle back in England, but it eventually just fell out of use. In America, though, it was preserved. It's another one of those linguistic fossils.
And you see a similar pattern with verb tenses. If you're talking about something that just happened, someone in the UK might say, I have eaten, using the present perfect tense. An American, on the other hand, would be way more likely to just say, I ate, using this simple past.
So, what does all of this mean? After all these twists and turns, which version is actually the right one?
Well, when you realize that there are over 70 major dialects between just these two countries, the whole idea of a single correct English, it just kind of falls apart completely, doesn't it?
You know, language is like a river. It's always flowing, always changing. Neither dialect is a mistake. They are just two powerful streams that branched off from the exact same source, each one carrying its own unique history.
So the next time you hear a different accent or a new word, just remember, you're not hearing a mistake.
You're hearing another chapter in the incredible, ever-evolving story of English. And really, who knows what the next chapter is going to bring?